Go ahead. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. Thank you for joining us on the third and final day of the symposium. And for all of you that were commenting on the 60 degrees earlier in the week, welcome to Colorado. So please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to give a shout out to the Broadmoor staff again for our great continental breakfast, sponsored by Valdez, and everything else they've done for us this week. So, quick reminder for those that are verified attendees on the classified session this afternoon, the bus will be in front of Broadmoor Hall and will be leaving at noon. So please get there if you plan on riding the bus. Another reminder for the AFCEA booth at booth 10 is just out the door to the right here. We have one more day of discount memberships and the complimentary match for the E1 through E6s. So, and at this point, I'd like to go ahead and bring up our Rocky Mountain Cyberspace Symposium 2019 chairman, Ms. Vanessa Johnson, to do some recognition for our volunteers. Thank you. I'm not.
Well, hi, everybody. Sorry about the weather. We dialed in something wrong this morning, and, that's all we get. So I normally do this at the end of the day, but I don't want to do it at the end of the day because then there aren't enough people to hear me say this. I wanted to take just a minute to recognize the people that make this happen. You see Phil and I on the stage, and you see us running around, but it's really all the rest of the people that make this whole thing happen year after year after year. So if I could get the staff to come up here, please, and I know you know who you are. So some of the folks that are coming up here right now have been involved with the symposium for a decade, right, Mike Clark? These are really the people that do all the things that you see, from the exhibitor and sponsorships to, I know some of you senior folks have had the opportunity to meet Debbie and Sharon upstairs. There are gatekeepers for all of the DV rooms upstairs. They make sure that none of the riffraff get in. Wanda has done security for years and has put together our volunteers this year. We've got Rich doing sponsorships. Vicky does all the registration stuff. Poor Ellis gets to deal with the 129 booths out on the floor and making sure all of our exhibitors are happy. Joan is our tweeter and our Facebooker and our, all those nice emails that you get from me constantly. Those start with Joan putting them all together so that they get sent out. Patrick's doing our security. Mike Porach is doing all the training and the tech talks this year, so he got that all set up. Mike is the general, overall, all-around protocol guy. He makes sure I don't forget anything. He sets up the luncheon, head table stuff for me. I mean, everything. The flags, you name it, Mike is there to do this, and he used to run this symposium years ago. And then Jerry, none of us, I don't think, on this stage could do anything without Jerry. Jerry is our event planner, so she does all the dealings with the Broadmoor and makes sure that we all stay in line with everything and keeps us on budget and finds ways for us to make more money for STEM. And then I'm not going to forget the guy standing behind me because he's standing behind me, but he always stands behind me and beside me and holds my hand and helps me. But my husband, he does everything. So he's awesome. And he ran the program this year, as you saw. And then do we have, are Bridget and Tammy in the room by chance? They are. Come on, ladies. So This is our AFCEA team, and oh, by the way, if I didn't mention, all but one of the people on this stage is a volunteer. So they do this as their second full-time job, right? And then these two fine ladies that are coming up on stage right now, Tammy and Bridget, work for the Broadmoor. They are part of this team and part of this family too, and have helped us for years make this thing what it is. So we couldn't do it without their help, and they're part of my team as well. So huge round of applause for this group. So get over it.
So now I'd like to introduce Cadet First Class James Lynch, who will introduce our first morning speaker.
General Mike Holmes is the commander of Air Combat Command at Joint Base Langley Eustis, Virginia. In this role, he trains and organizes combat-ready air, space, and cyberspace assets for deployment, a role befitting a seasoned fighter pilot. He entered the Air Force through officer training school in 1981 after graduating with an electrical engineering degree from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. A graduate of Air Force Fighter Weapons School, General Holmes has over 500 combat hours in the F-15, a mere fraction of over 4,000 hours in the cockpit throughout his career. He has served in headquarters staff here and abroad, from the Office of the Secretary of Defense to Pacific Air Forces. He has displayed an exemplary service record, including accolades such as the Distinguished Service Medal, the Bronze Star, and the Legion of Merit. Prior to becoming Air Combat Commander in March 2017, he served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategic Plans Requirements, Headquarters, U.S. Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce General Mike Holmes.
Thanks, Cadet Lynch. Good morning, everybody. I can almost see you with the lights, so it'll take me a minute to get used to the view from up here. But I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here at this event. I know that I've got a group of our Air Force leaders from across our cyber and comm career fields. I have industry leaders. I'd like to send a special thanks to the sponsors that make events like this happen. And then finally to Vanessa Johnson for your long efforts to make this thing what it is today. It truly is a kind of a matchless event, and I'm happy to be here with everybody. As Cadet Lynch said, I've been in the job about 20 months. And one of the first places I went when I came into the job was here in this same place for an event for the Space Symposium. And I chose my attendance there on purpose and carefully as a new commander of Air Combat Command, because I wanted everybody to know that at Air Combat Command we will be just as invested in controlling and exploiting space as we are in controlling and exploiting the air, and that we wanted to throw our weight in and be prepared to help Air Force Space Command as they secure space against improving threats. And I bring that up because I chose, again, carefully to be here at this event today. And there's an ACC message in my presence both places. And what I'd start with is, Air Combat Command is not your father's Tactical Air Command. We've grown to include both kinetic and non-kinetic, conventional and non-conventional forces. And General Skinner and General Wegeman, kind of my highest ranking cyber guys, have both pretended that Air Combat Command, that the ACC stands for Air and Cyber Command now as we go forward. And we'll keep working that name. I don't know, it's got a ring to it. We'll see how it goes. But I typically say two things about being the Air Combat Command commander after 20 months. When my friends ask me, how's it going? How do you like it? I go, well, everything that comes across my desk is fascinating. And it truly is. And the addition of cyber capabilities into Air Combat Command is as fascinating as anything I deal with. And then the second half of that is everything I've ever complained about my whole life is now my fault. And bringing the Air Force's cyber capabilities over adds some more things that are my fault, that I've complained about in the past. So as a commander, and with all the things that the Secretary Wilson and Chief Goldfein have asked us to work on, I kind of have two priorities for the second half of my command at Air Combat Command for the second 18 months. And the first is readiness of our force, conventional and non-conventional, kinetic and non-kinetic, making sure that Air Combat Command's forces will be ready to line up against peer threats. And I'll talk about that for a minute. And then the second one is the integration of the Air Force's cyber capabilities into everything that Air Combat Command does, into everything the Air Force does, and the integration of Air Combat Command's capabilities alongside cyber forces to achieve our objectives. That readiness, I'll start with, is that we have to make sure that our forces are ready to compete, deter, and if required, to defeat peer adversaries. And the Secretary of the Air Force has given us some goals to start with our pacing units. And pacing units are those units that are employed right away, or in the first days or first hours of a conflict. And cyber and our comm forces are certainly a part of that. They're employed from the time we start all the way through the end of a conflict. And so there are pacing units, there are cyber units among those pacing units as we go forward. And so we have to master what is the readiness measurement of our cyber forces. We know on the conventional side, we've typically measured our readiness through a combination of factors. We look at, do we have the number of people assigned? Do those people have the right training and qualifications? Do they have the right equipment and the right supply of resources and things that they need? We measure those through systems like sorts or DERS, and we're able to report that based on numbers. And then we usually have a training metric on top of that. For our air squadrons, it's how many times a month did a crew get to train in the air or in a simulator. So part of what we'll do as we go forward with cyber is Major General Skinner is working hard on defining what those readiness metrics are for our cyber operations units, how we'll measure their readiness, because measuring is the first step in getting the resources you need to improve your readiness. If you can go back and show that I don't have the people I need, or I need new training programs, or they're not operating on the right network equipment, then we can go close the gap to make them ready. So the first part of that readiness is I would call activity-based readiness. It's measuring what you do in training to be ready. The second part is ready for what? I have a ready unit, but are they ready to defend our network against criminal elements? Are they ready to do offensive operations against a peer threat? How do I know ready for what? And to determine that, you need a realistic environment to train in. On the air side, we've had things like the National Test and Training Range down north of Las Vegas, where we pull integrated threats together and we train against a realistic threat. To answer our cyber ready for what questions, we'll have to build that realistic integrated training environment so that our crews can go operate against representative threats. And then we'll have to make sure that we're pulling their efforts together with the rest of the force through multi-domain command and control, one of the Air Force's emphasis areas that we're also working in Air Combat Command. So that's the readiness part. And we're making sure that readiness, that we can measure it and that we can help our cyber forces be ready. And then the second part is the integration of our cyber and communications capabilities back into Air Combat Command. And I'd like to tell you that it's more than an administrative move. It's more than a paper move. It's more than assigning a numbered Air Force from one command to another. Now, we're going to improve the readiness and effectiveness of our forces, and that's the number one goal we have from the Chief and the Secretary, and so that's the number one reason behind this move. is to present more ready and effective or lethal cyber forces. And then by moving it to Air Combat Command, it also gives General Raymond and Air Force Space Command, I see General Shaw sitting here, glad to be here with our teammates there, to focus all of their efforts on defeating peer space threats. And Air Force Space Command provides the world's finest space capabilities. There's no one that matches them. And they're getting better every day as we think about how this world is changing. And it gives them the opportunity to focus exclusively on controlling and exploiting the air. But going back to where I started, it'll be a partnership. And both the conventional forces Air Combat Command brings to that fight and our cyber forces will play a role in their battle to control and exploit space. And so if we move it, why Air Combat Command? Well, again, I think it gives us an opportunity to integrate both cyber and conventional forces better, to better integrate our cyber and our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance forces, and then to think about how we'll integrate not new capabilities, but capabilities that we have concentrated less on over the last few years. And I'm talking about our information operations and information warfare capabilities, our electronic combat and electronic warfare capabilities. How can we take conventional and cyber and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance forces and then pull them together to have new capabilities in information warfare and in electronic combat? And Air Combat Command has experience in pulling those together. So that's why Air Combat Command. Why now? I think it's an auspicious time for a couple of reasons. One of them is we have a new national defense strategy, relatively new, in the last year or so. And that national defense strategy directs the Department of Defense to focus our efforts on peer threats, on peer adversaries, which primarily Russia and China, and the threats that they pose to our country, while maintaining cost-effective capabilities to continue the fight against violent extremist organizations. Now, that battle against peer threats takes place both in competition that happens all the time, everywhere around the world, every day, mostly below the level of armed conflict, and God forbid, in armed conflict. And so we have to prepare for both. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, through the Joint Staff, has added a layer to that national defense strategy that says the way we will achieve the goals in the national defense strategy is through a concept called global, easy for you to say, global integrated employment, which means our battles can no longer be fought in one part of the world or in one COCOM's area of responsibility. If you square off against a peer adversary, it will be across the regions of the world. It will be across all domains. And so it's a good time for us to think about how we'll better integrate those capabilities. So that's one of the auspicious timing points. And the second one is, as we realize the requirements for that kind of competition and conflict, we have new authorities delegated down to military forces that have been previously held up at the highest levels, and some of those authorities are in cyber. So we now have delegated authorities down to military commanders that would have previously been held at a higher level, and that forces changes in the way we think and plan about how we'll compete and how we'll fight. What are those changes? Well, one of them is, as military leaders, if we're not careful, we can get caught into thinking about kind of a 1 and a 0 difference between war and peace, a state of war and a state of peace. In this world that we're in, it might be better to talk about continuous, persistent engagement, because we're in a competition every day against people who are trying to rewrite the world, rewrite the rules, and change the way business is conducted around the world, change the way military force is used into a situation that's more in their advantage. So we'll have to have global capabilities, we'll have to have authorities delegated, and we'll have to have an empowered force that can act without waiting to be told exactly what to do. So we feel a sense of urgency across Air Combat Command, but specifically in our cyber and comm areas, to develop the people, to make sure they're ready for this continuous, persistent engagement, and to update their training. We think our cyber capability will have to be fully resourced with the infrastructure, the tools, and the payloads or weapons that are required in cyber operations. We're going to have to build that realistic training environment so that our operators can operate against representative threats. and practice and understand their capabilities. We're going to have to build that staff planning expertise in cyber and the electromagnetic spectrum and tie that together with our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, information ops, and information warfare planning capabilities. And we're going to have to make sure we provide the appropriate intelligence support to cyber as a warfighting tool. And then ultimately our goal is to deliver full spectrum capabilities, from network ops, adding full spectrum defensive cyber operations and offensive cyber operations to our bag of tools. And we're doing it again to reset deterrence against peer threats. I believe that the peer threats that we talk about have learned over the last 15 years that to find ways that they can operate and they can work to achieve their goals in competition at a level lower than they think would trigger a response from us. And so part of our job as we integrate these non-kinetic tools into our kit bag is to be able to offer our national decision makers options that they're willing to use in this competition space. Options that can deter peer cyber activities against our country, that are not going to escalate straight into armed military force, and to try to reset this competition over time back to our advantage. The adversaries I'm talking about have proven that they can operate below that response. And besides the hard tools of using cyber to get inside our operating systems or to prepare options for combat, we know that over the last few years we've seen them operate in that nexus of cyber in the information space to stoke the fires of political unrest in our country and across the Western liberal democratic allies that we have, and to attack not just our forces or our economy, but our truths and our freedoms, and ultimately our values. And so when the United States goes to war or goes to competition, we go to war with our values. Our airmen bring those values with us. And our Department of Defense and our airmen have earned the American people's trust as they operate there. They trust us to defend our people, to defend our country, and they need to trust us to defend our democratic institutions, to defend our truths, and defend our freedoms as well in this new space where we're operating. So how will we go forward? What does it mean to bring 24th Air Force and cyber capabilities into Air Combat Command? Well, we spent the first 6 or 8 months doing a mission analysis of our Air Combat Command staff. And we revamped our headquarters. We created some new divisions that are designed to focus on not just cyber capabilities, but how we'll put them together with our conventional and unconventional capabilities. And we revamped our staff. But we wanted to also take an opportunity in this mission analysis to look across all of Air Combat Command and see if there were changes we needed to make to prepare us for the 21st century. So we're also going to make some recommendations on how we present our conventional forces, the forces that we rotate forward into combatant commanders' areas, and the globally presented forces like cyber. How will we present those forces to commanders? How do we integrate kinetic and non-kinetic forces on our staff with each other and with our conventional forces? And then ultimately, we're in the second half of that mission analysis, which is what will that mean for our NAF and wing structure? Will we make changes at our numbered Air Force and our wing level? And we're working through recommendations there that we'll take to the chief this spring. I think the changes that we will make, and I think we'll make some, will likely come in steps. We won't go straight to a final solution. We'll take some steps forward on how to integrate the capabilities together better. We'll learn and we'll tweak it over time. And a goal, as we talk about pulling these things together, is to be able to bring all our domains together in support of our national decision makers. So I'll give you a quick vignette. What does that mean? What am I talking about? Well, imagine that Air Force Space Command is faced with a threat to one of their space systems, and in this case, it's a terrestrial threat. Maybe it's a high-energy, directed energy weapon on the ground. Maybe it's a direct-to-orbit anti-satellite technology. And through our ISR tools, we're able to both detect the system and locate it, and to determine that there's been an order given to use it. It takes time then to go counter that threat. And so imagine a world where Air Force Space Command then decides whether to maneuver that resource to make it harder to target, while we use a cyber tool to perhaps fix that enemy tool in place. If it's a directed energy weapon, maybe we can just point it over there and make it stay pointed over there. Maybe we can do something to turn it off while we muster the tools together through multi-domain control, command and control to bring a conventional capability, a kinetic weapon to defeat that threat before it can have a counter space effect. So the idea is, how can we pull all these tools together to have an effect on the battlefield? And that's what we're talking about with multi-domain operations. And you can see that there's a need then for multi-domain command and control to be able to pull all that together in an operation that takes place across the globe using all domains. So where will we need help? And for my industry friends and partners out here, where will we need your help? Well, we're going to need your help with that cyber infrastructure, with the networks and tools and payloads that our cyber operators will need. We're going to need your help as we move toward our IT as a service proposals. You know that we have 7 pathfinders that we've begun to try to cooperate with industry and to see how we will work the requirements, both for the user experience, to deliver the tools that our airmen need effectively, and for the security, to make sure that we're providing those tools in a secure way. We want to work with you to find out commercial best practices. We want to figure out where we can rely on those commercial best practices and how we'll secure our network and deliver a user experience based on the things you have learned doing the same things in industry. One example of a way we can work forward together is down at Tyndall Air Force Base. So last fall, when Hurricane Michael came through, it wrecked the physical infrastructure of Tyndall, and it also wrecked the communications infrastructure at Tyndall. And so we were faced with a choice. Would we rebuild Tyndall exactly the way it was? And the answer is no. We'd like to rebuild it better than it was. And so there's an infrastructure piece of that, and it includes the mission assurance part of our comm. And so we've added a look at Tyndall to see if we can go forward, and instead of rebuilding that comm infrastructure the way it was, can we rebuild it the way we need it to be? And we look forward to partnering there with you. We're also deploying mission defense teams. And our mission defense teams will let us take our airmen, hopefully freed up from doing some of the network tasks that'll be done by industry as part of our IT as a service, to focus on the defense not just of our networks, but the defense of our weapon systems. How do we make sure that cyber threats are unable to penetrate the computers in an F-35 or an F-15 or into our cyber offensive and defensive systems? And we'll need your help there to get the tools and the training required to make that work. Another area is developmental ops, and how will we develop the new software and hardware that we need to integrate these things together in multi-domain command and control. We've taken some steps to do that. We talk about the Kessel Run project that's redoing our Air Operations Center. What can we learn from you? How can we exploit the successes we've had there? And what should the mix of your industry talents and our military operators doing developmental ops, how should that look as we go forward? We're also going to continue to need expeditionary comm packages. And so the 5th Combat Comm Group, formerly of Air Combat Command, now part of 24th Air Force, will continue to rely on their capability to build networks and communication systems as we look at new operating concepts like distributed operations or agile combat employment that are designed to make us harder to target when we go forward against peer adversaries. And then finally, we'll need the mission planning and multi-domain command and control systems required to make this whole idea work. So again, I'm here on purpose because I want both our airmen and our industry partners to know that Air Combat Command is committed. We have a talented bunch of cyber and comm leaders and a strong bullpen behind them. I can tell you I know that firsthand from serving on our most recent Commander's Selection Board, where the deepest bench of people we have in the Air Force at that group command level is in our cyber and ISR airmen. They're talented. They've been looking into this. They are teaching me, and the leaders that I have in the front row down here, from Major General Bob Skinner, Mr. Bill Marion is here with us as our Deputy CIO, Brigadier General Select Chad Radke, our A6 from Air Combat Command. They're working together to figure out our way forward, and we want to continue to work with you to do that. We need your help. I also know this is bigger than Air Combat Command. I know I'm in a room with the cyber professionals and the sixes from across the Air Force, and we know we have to work with you, and we have to make sure that we're delivering the tools that you need for your particular requirements. So finally, my hat is off once again to the Rocky Mountain chapter and this event that they put on for 16 years that's grown into, if not the premier event, a premier event to bring us together to figure out how we'll meet the challenges of the future. Someday down the road, we'd like to see an event like this happen at Hampton Roads. We have a lot to learn from the people that put on kind of the big four Grand Slam events around the country. We're hopeful that we can find our way to putting on another one of those down at Hampton in that area so that we can bring Army TRADOC and their resources to reach into the Army, the Navy's Fleet Forces Command that is there in the area, and then the NATO Transformation Headquarters on the Norfolk side, and see if there are opportunities for us to pull all our resources together to meet with industry and see if we can gain things there. So thanks for your time. Thanks for inviting me to be here with you today. And if there's some time, I'd be happy to take questions if you have them. Thanks very much. I cannot see you, so somebody will help with the microphones if there's a question. Who's got the first one? I'm comfortable with periods of awkward silence, but my feelings won't be hurt if you'd rather talk to each other in the break.
General Holmes.
Yes, sir.
Sir, as you've taken over 24th Air Force, obviously you had 25th Air Force. Part of that integration, multi-domain, and working the cyber slice with the intel slice, you own them both. You don't have to ask permission from nobody. How's that kind of working out? And you see some exciting things going on in that cross-fertilization of the intel side and the traditional cyber side?
Yes, sir. So 24th and 25th, I think, have always worked closely together. They've always been able to partner. It helps that they're there in San Antonio together, very close to each other, but they've had a strong partnership. As we look at where we'll go forward in the future, we're looking at, do we need to make some changes at the wing level first? Are there elements of 25th that work side by side with 24th every day on our cyber mission teams or in other areas that would work better if we put them together into the same wing or the same squadron? We'll look at some moves there. And then we're working through the process of deciding how will we take direction that comes into our ISR side, direction that comes into our cyber side, work through some examples of that, and decide what's the best organizational structure to go forward. And you kind of allude to the primary choice is, will we combine parts of those together into one organization, or will we keep parts of them separate? And that's the heart of what we're working through this spring as we go forward. There's a lot of hats if you pull those two organizations together, a lot of tasks to put together. And one of the things I want to make sure is that we don't just create another level of bureaucracy from Headquarters Air Force to Air Combat Command to another numbered Air Force headquarters that doesn't offer much value to the operators. How many levels of that bureaucracy do we need? And so where should our direct chain be? So they work together every day. They work together better and better every day. As I talked about, we'll need to make sure that our cyber component has the ISR support that they need to be successful. And then we also have to realize the role that cyber tools play in multi-domain ISR. And we're going to work through that over the next month or so. Thanks.
Good morning, General.
Hi.
My question for you is, Progress is a great tool for moving forward in the industry.
Thanks, I see you.
And so is the change management boards. So what kind of advice do you have for streamlining the process to ensure that the right changes are being put into place?
Part of the things we're going to do going forward is it won't just be about what happens at Air Combat Command and what happens down at 24th Air Force or in the NAF structure. We're working closely with our CIO for the Air Force, our Undersecretary, the Honorable Mr. Matt Donovan, and with Bill Marion, the Deputy CIO. And we spent a lot of time talking, and we spent some time talking this morning about how will we pull together the the strategy side at the headquarters, with the operations side at 24th, and then with the developmental side in the Life Cycle Management Center in our program office. And the key there, I think, is to try to get the right people, have the right process where all three of those people are represented as we go forward. And I think that's what you're getting at, and that's actually where we're spending most of our time on this discussion. We know there'll be a headquarters role for strategy. We know that 24th Air Force and their subordinate units will be operating the network. And then how will we work with the acquisition side to tie those together to be able to make timely decisions, and again, to balance the user experience. Do I have a network that works? Am I waiting for the blue circle of death when I log on every morning? Do I have tools that I can actually be confident I can use every day, with the need to keep it secure and to keep it modernized? And we hope through Enterprise IT as a service that we'll be able to rely on industry partners to bring what you know to the battlefield, and to be able to take care of that, some of that modernization cycle for us, so that we can focus on fighting in the cyber domain.
Good morning, General. Fred Mooney from Cisco. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, Fred.
My question is, in recent history, we had Cyber Command Provisional, then we had 8th Air Force owning cyber, and then it was AFSpace for about 10 years, and now it's back to ACC. Do you believe it's finally found a permanent home? And what is the value proposition for having it under Air Combat Command?
Well, I think it does. I think it has found a permanent home, and I think we see our cyber capabilities. The network is a requirement for everybody in the Air Force. Everything we do is built on this electromagnetic spectrum, whether it's RF or whether it's the man-made part in the cyber world, and everything we do hinges on that ability. All the improvements we've made in the capability of our conventional forces hinge on bringing in extra computing power, which presents extra vulnerabilities, and so that's a key to everything we do. And then the second half of that is that we recognize that in this world of persistent engagement, where we're in competition every day with Russia and China, that one of our most valuable tools is this cyber tool that we have. And so we'll work to pull them together, and I think it's found its home, and I think the value proposition is that Air Combat Command has been the place over the last 10 years where we've brought our fighter and bomber capabilities together, where we've brought our ISR capabilities together with our conventional capabilities, so that we can tip and cue. We can use our cyber collection to force a reaction from the enemy, so that we can collect against them, so that we can operate against them with our conventional forces. And I think the value proposition is, how will we take all those tools together under multi-domain command and control, and work out how we can bring them all together in an integrated way at the same time, instead of operating through our stovepipes. Sir. Phil.
One of the questions I had is, how are we changing our training and education pipelines to kind of instill that multi-domain ops mindset in our young officers and enlisted leaders?
Thanks. That's a great question. Our premier forum for working on the multi-domain mindset right now is in the integration phase at the Fighter Weapons School. We call it WISINT, so Weapons School Integration. In the last 3 weeks or so of every 6-month Fighter Weapons School class, we bring all of our best young warriors, officer and enlisted, because we run advanced instructor courses there too alongside the weapons school. And we bring them together to solve problems over about 3 weeks that require multi-domain integrated solutions to be able to win. And so we have our cyber, our space, our intelligence, our different weapon systems. We give them a problem, we put somebody in charge, and we have them go figure it out, or not, and learn how they need to do it better. That's our premier integration event on pulling those things together. I think you're right that we need to reach that out, and the way we do that right now is those young weapons officers go home and they take that knowledge and they teach it to the people they're responsible for instructing. We're also taking a hard look at how we develop our cyber leaders specifically. This 17 career field is giant. It encompasses a whole lot of tasks, and in the past we've tried to build a universal 17 that could do everything. And as a warfighter, it's going to be really hard to have the skill and the expertise to go forward as an offensive or defensive operator and be able to participate in expeditionary comms and be a development person and do all those things. So General Kevin Kennedy on the air staff, along with our staff, is working to take a look at that development and training pyramid. And part of what we're going to decide is how broad do we want our operators to be, and then how deep do we want them to be. Instead of trying to teach everybody to do everything, I think we'll focus people on a portion of that, still expose them to the rest, but focus their talents on a portion of that, and try to build in the things we do in the rest of the Air Force. We'll have, after initial training, mission qualification training in each of those areas. We'll have some equivalent of an instructor upgrade in those areas so that we bring those extra skills. We'll have the weapons school, and we'll teach people how to teach people when they come back. And I'd expect us to roll that out pretty soon. Have recently rolled out a development plan for our 14s, for our intel officers, and we're able to use some of that format with the information that we gathered from our young operators to develop a plan to go forward there too.
Good morning, sir. This is Sheila Buzel from Space Command.
Hi.
Over here, right in front of you.
Thank you.
5 foot. Sir, I come from the Cybercom tribe, and I've been in Space Command for about 1.5 years. So I'm understanding space situational awareness, and it sounds like a lot like ISR. And there's a growing demand for cyber ISR as well. Is there any conversation that has happened at the higher levels on increasing ISR for space and cyber?
As a matter of fact, there is, and there has. Last fall, Air Combat Command with our 24th Air Force and Half A2 held a series of meetings with Air Force Space Command to make sure that we have a better understanding of what the ISR requirements are to be able to control and exploit space. And we're working together with them to provide intel people at the squadron level, to train our operators and get them used to working together with the integrated intel folks, and then provide everything from the national technical means to what I would call all domain ISR to be able to help them with everything they need. In Air Combat Command, as we go forward and with the things we're trying to do, we think there's about 3 fundamentals that are required for everything we look at. One is multi-domain ISR, being able to take and gather information across all the domains, including publicly available information, to be able to pull that together into improved knowledge of what the enemy's trying to do and where they are. The next is advanced battle management, being able to pull that information together to use a combination of people and artificial intelligence to sort through that and make decisions quicker. And then the third is the agile, resilient communications that it'll take to link those together and to be able to make sure that we can communicate from headquarters with our airmen in the field and work through it. And we look forward to continuing to work with Air Force Space Command. But you know, this is not new to us. Our 480th Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Wing has 5 groups. A group that's oriented at Air Force service components that are components to regional combatant commanders. And we'll work through with Space Command, and we'll make sure that they have access to the tools that they need to serve their global combatant commander as we move towards standing up a U.S. Space Command.
General Holmes?
Yes.
Deborah, over here. Deborah McCrae. I work at the 557th Weather Wing, and I've been in and around the military. I'm retired Air Force. And the one thing I'm noticing about the younger airmen, maybe we need to get them not just pigeonholed in like the mission defense team or the cyber squadrons, but perhaps put out a call like we do for the testing for people that speak foreign languages. Have a test like that so that people that maybe they're in CE, but they have an aptitude for cyber and for computer stuff, to give them an option and a chance to basically test out of where they're at now and use those abilities.
Thank you. No, I think that's a great suggestion. We do know that with the generation of airmen that we have brought into the Air Force, that we have a lot of coders. And we have a lot of people that do that on their own, that do it as a hobby, and are able to bring those skills to work every day. And one of the places where we do that now is in that 480th Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Wing, where we allow people to work on some solutions and bring things into their network that they've done themselves through an innovation process. We do know that they're out there, and part of this balance as we go forward is going to be deciding the right mix of industry coders and our own Air Force coders. We have a small career field of Air Force coders. One of the things that General Skinner is looking at is, do we need to make that bigger as we work through our development part of that spectrum of what 17s do. And Air Education and Training Command in their cyber education efforts are working to find a way to give people constructive credit for what they already know. And then to some cases, they're able to do that now. So when we bring a young person in and we sit them down in their technical training as an airman, enlisted airman, or as an officer, they're able to proficiency advance through some of those training requirements and go to the next level as soon as they're ready. There's still some frustration, there's still some bureaucracy. I know we still have young people that are frustrated that they can't go straight to what they were doing in a college program or where they were somewhere else. We make them airmen and we ask them to do some of the rest of the skill set. But I think you're on to something, and I think it's something we're trying to do.
General Holmes, Bill Gregory, AFRL at your 11 o'clock.
Thanks.
My question deals with the stand-up of the Air Force warfighting integration capability and how, as the lead command for cyber, how you're going to work Air Force-wide cyber requirements with the AFWIC and how you're going to integrate S&T within this process as coming from the Air Force Research Lab.
Yep, thanks. Let's see, 7 minutes and 15 seconds. We'll see how I do. See how I do on answering that. For the rest of the room, the Air Force warfighting integration capability was recently stood up under the Headquarters Air Force A5, Lieutenant General Tim Fay. Right now it's being run by Major General Mike Fantini underneath Tim. And we thought over the last couple of years that we had been building our Air Force planning, our plan, strategy, and programming through stovepipes, through core functions, so that I pushed up a counter-air stovepipe and a global precision attack stovepipe and a personnel recovery stovepipe. Air Mobility Command pushed up theirs, Global Strike pushed up theirs, and then they came up and then we tried to put them together after they had already been built in stovepipes. And we wanted to move to a pathway where we start first with the threat, with a design for how we think the Air Force should counter that threat, and then let the details of that flow back down into the core functions. We sent about 50 people from Air Combat Command that were doing work for us in those core functions up to help be seed corn for the staff in the warfighter integration capability. And we'll continue to do a mix between what they do in design and strategy and decide that we need a capability to do X. They'll hand some of that work down to us and we'll work forward on it. For cyber in particular, because of the need to coordinate from our CIO down through ACC, down through 24th Air Force, I think you'll see us work to build a structure that allows Bob Skinner's operators and Chad Radige's guys who represent them to work directly with the Lifecycle Management Center and the program office to work the requirement part together so that we have operators in the room and so that they're able to make trade-offs. Say, we wrote a requirement to do X. It's going to cost 3 times as much as we thought it would. Can we live with Y at 1/3 of the cost? Okay, let's do that. And then we'll continue to work on the capability. That's the structure that we're trying to build. But I'm a big supporter, I'm a big fan of the Air Force warfighter integration capability. You can make the case that it takes some power away from Air Combat Command, but that's okay. You know, our job is to be ready to compete, to deter, and to defeat our adversaries. And I think it's time for us to pull our approach to it together under an overall design. And then as the MASCOMs, then we'll work to build the pieces that work under that design. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Phil. Thanks. Thank you.
General Holmes, thanks for taking the time to spend with us today and providing those words. We're going to take a quick break. Please plan on being back here at 9:45 for our first panel, and enjoy the morning break sponsored by KPMG.